From Nairobi to the latest as far as the markets are concerned in South Africa, look at the economy there. And in this week's slot with First National Bank, we'll be taking a look at the Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana's midterm budget last week. We'll also take a look at October's inflation data that's been released a little bit later on this week around Wednesday, and also what to expect from retail sales. And for this conversation, we're joined by FNB senior economist Koketso Mano. A very good afternoon to you, Koketso. Good to have you with us. So last week we saw the finance minister table the midterm budget. What was the key takeaway?
It was a good budget. I think that's one place to start. It was well received by the markets. I think us as economists are also encouraged by the fiscal consolidation that is reflected in that budget. There's other things that the budget managed to show us, right, is there's still quite a good consensus around structural reform. So we see that coming through strongly in the budget. It's also about, state capacity, right, recapacitating the state. And that's something that is going to be good for our institutions going forward. So it was a very good budget from that sense. We saw a revenue overrun, which also speaks to SARS efficiencies. So that's something that we hope will continue to build a strong base for revenue collection going forward, or revenue mobilization. We did see, for example, that the inflation target was taken on or formally backed by the minister. So we're now working with a 3% inflation target with a 1 percentage points tolerance band to allow for economic shocks. But either way, what that inflation target shift really does for the fiscal matrices is that while in the near term it does speak to lower nominal GDP growth, so unfortunately it does weigh on revenue collections, it does weigh on a few of those fiscal matrices. But going forward, the hope is that you see the growth in expenditure slowing in line with lower inflation. What you should also see from a borrowing point of view is that a lower risk, lower inflation-linked bond spending, for example, less pressure when it comes to foreign exchange borrowing, for example. All of that should speak to, a lower interest rate bill when it comes to borrowing from the government, by the government rather. So on the net, what you should see is that also creates some stability in terms of debt. So we see debt stabilizing over the medium-term expenditure framework. And all in all, Tammy, that's all going to be positive for sustainability in South Africa's fiscal matrices, but also economic growth.
Let's project into Wednesday now. We are expecting October's inflation data to be released. If we look at the data for September, it did increase slightly. What should we be expecting for October?
Unfortunately, we see another increase in October. So we saw that slight uptick to 3.4% in September. So October, we see another uptick to 3.7%. It still remains within the new target band. So that's something that's still positive. But it will be very interesting to see how the MPC internalizes the outcome that we get on Wednesday in terms of their outlook for not only inflation, but monetary policy as well. But either way, what you should see in that number is mostly which is something that we've been flagging for quite some time. In the second half of this year, you would have less positive base effects that are supporting the numbers downward, right? So that's starting to come out of the system, and that's why we're seeing that this uptick in inflation is necessarily going to be there's strong demand in the economy, and so core inflation is rising rapidly. It won't be a story around, fuel prices becoming less supportive in the economy. So hopefully we still see the supply side of the economy still being positive from that point of view. But on the net, you should see the headline numbers rising because of this fading positive base effect.
All right, we're going to get through this really, really quickly. Wednesday is another big day. Retail sales also being released. Are we going to be seeing continued growth, do you think, for September?
We do think we will probably still see continued growth, but you remember in the previous numbers, we did see a deceleration in that growth. It speaks to less liquidity injections, but we still think lower inflation, higher real incomes, less restrictive monetary policy still upholds retail sales growth.
Koketso Mano, always a pleasure. We look forward to Wednesday and seeing if your predictions are on point. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amy.
Have a great one. That's Koketso Mano, FNB senior economist.